From as far back as I can remember. I knew my mom hated me. She gives me sleeping pills when I'm 3. When I'm 5, she tries pesticide instead. But I'm hard to get rid of. By the time I'm 7, I've already learned how to fight back. If she refuses to give me food, I flip the table so no one can eat either. If he beats me up until I'm on the ground writhing in pain, I go after her beloved son the same way, leaving him bruised and bawling. That's how we stay locked in battle, until I turn 12. Everything changes when my youngest sister is born. I'm clumsily trying to help with her wet diaper, when Mom suddenly shoves me against the wall. The look in her eyes holds both disgust and fear. What were you trying to do to my daughter? I knew it. You take after that monster of a father. Why didn't you just die with him? I hold my aching head. For the first time, I don't fight back. I believe she's right. My existence is a mistake. I should never have been alive. By the time I managed to limp to Granny's house, night had already fallen. Granny saw the mess I was in, and didn't look surprised. She took out her first aid kit and treated my injuries, like she always did, then made me a simple plate of carbonara. Usually I would eat while swearing I'd get even the next day, but this time I stared at the food and quietly asked Granny, I'm not actually Dad's child, am I? She didn't answer, but the rejection and disgust flickering in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She stood abruptly and started wiping the table over and over, right where the first aid kit had been. That was when I realized that my blood was something they all wanted to stay away from. I was the son of a rapist. No wonder mam hatid me. A sickening feeling rose in my throat. I bolted outside and leaned against the fence. Fetching the night air stung the scrapes on my face. Before, whenever Mom hit me, I told myself she owed me for every bruise she'd inflicted on me. One day I'd make her pay them back. But now I didn't think I could even look her in the eye. I didn't stay at Granny's. She didn't come after me either. Instead, I wandered the streets with no idea where to go. That was when I saw a family outside a restaurant. They were celebrating someone's birthday, smiling and laughing. The woman in the middle was probably the mother. She looked so happy that I instinctively took a step back. Last year on Mom's birthday, she'd smiled just like that before she saw me. The moment she saw me walk in, her smile vanished, placed with utter disgust. Back then, we had an essay with the theme, my mother. I wrote that Mom was a heartless villain. My teacher dragged me into her office and lectured me for an entire period. I barely heard most of it. I only remembered her saying, no mother in this world would ever stop loving her child. I believed her. I saved money from collecting recyclables and bought my mom a birthday cake. I just wanted a hug, the same kind she gave my brother, Casper Willis. But her frigid expression was like a stab in the heart. I felt like a fool standing there with that cake in my hands. Anger overwhelmed me. When no one was looking, I went out and caught a couple of frogs in the garden. Then I hid them in the cake. I could still remember the way she screamed when they jumped out. Back then, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I thought she didn't deserve to be a mother. I thought she had it coming. But now I know the truth. The one who didn't deserve anything was me. My existence itself had hurt her. As I watched that mother smile through the restaurant window, I made a decision. This year for Mom's birthday, I would give her a gift she would truly be happy with, one that would free her completely. I decided to die. Once that thought took root in my mind, my steps felt lighter. I even started planning how to do it without troubling anyone. I needed to do something that wouldn't leave a mess. But before I could carry out my plan, a patrolling officer spotted me and brought me home. Mom answered the door. As the door shut behind us, I stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. Her icy tone sliced through the air. Why didn't you just die out there? I almost snapped back, but I forced the words down before they came out. Still, as I stared at her back, I couldn't stop myself from asking, what would you do if I really did die? Would she be the least bit sad? If you've got the guts, hurry up and do it, I'd celebrate. She walked straight into my siblings' room and closed the door. I stood rooted to my spot in the living room. After a long while, I wiped my face and let out a humorless laugh. Mom would definitely like the birthday present I had prepared. The kid who collected recyclables with me was an orphan, named Samuel Hudson. He grew up bouncing from home to home, and always knew how to find money where no one else would look. After school, I bought him a popsicle. We sat on the curb together, and I lowered my voice to ask how a person could die in a way that looked like an accident. Samuel stared at me like I'd grown 2 heads, and he shoved the half-eaten popsicle into my hand. Stay away from me. I'm not doing anything illegal, he said. I blinked. Holding 2 popsicles illegal? What are you talking about? I'm serious. How does someone you know accidentally die? Preferably without too much pain, though they might be scared. Sucked in a sharp breath and tried to run. I dropped the popsicles and grabbed him before he could get away. You ate my treat. You're helping me whether you like it or not. Samuel gave up and plopped onto the sidewalk looking miserable. Dude, you have your parents. Why are you trying to die? Yeah, they hit you a lot, but they don't exactly starve you either. Look at your arms. You're stronger than me. The words stuck in my throat. I wanted to tell him. It was exactly because they weren't completely evil or kind that it hurt so much. Now that I knew how I came to be, I couldn't even justify the anger and resentment I felt. I didn't think I could keep living like this. But saying any of that out loud would only cause more trouble for Mom. So I said hoarsely, "Just answer me. Are you helping or not?" He wailed. "You're trying to kill your mom. Why would I get involved in that?" I froze, staring at him in confusion. When did I ever say that? Before I could explain, a shrill cry cut through the air. Bad guys trying to hurt Mom. My brain stalled. Slowly, I turned toward the sound. It was my brother Casper. He burst out crying and screaming, sprinting so fast that one of his shoes flew off. That night, the sound of hitting echoed through the house endlessly. Mom swung a broom at me like I was her worst enemy. Her eyes were red with fury, but I saw something else too. The tears in the corner of her eyes. I'd seen them before. Back then, I thought she was pretending, and I would slam into her and promise that once I grew up, I'd make her pay for everything. But that night, I curled up on the icy floor and didn't move. Eventually, the broom slipped from her fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Mom didn't look back. She just stumbled into her room. A long time passed before I pushed myself up. I heard a muffled sob from behind her door, the kind that only escaped because she was trying so hard to hold it in. The sob sliced at my heart like a blade. My face stung and I collapsed back onto the tiles. I covered my eyes with my arm, but all I felt was moisture. It wasn't tears. It was blood mixed with dust. Just like me, it was filthy. You know, when she was 19, she cried the same way. I looked up sharply. Granny stood by the doorway, her cloudy eyes drifting somewhere between me and a memory she couldn't put down. That night she came home with torn clothes and bruises. She didn't cry out loud. She just her lip until it bled. My heart dropped. She tried to get rid of you, but she was too weak. After you were born, I abandoned you myself. But the police came the next morning holding you, saying abandonment is a crime. They said they would check back. My life was a ridiculous joke. No one welcomed to my arrival. Yet I was still here. Granny cleaned my injuries like she always did. She looked tired, but she rambled on. Don't blame her. She's been hurting for a long time. I lowered my head and laughed. Granny, I don't blame her anymore. I didn't hate Mom anymore. But she still hated me enough to want me gone. The night she pressed a pillow over my face. She didn't know I was awake. Her hands were shaking. I didn't struggle. I just closed my eyes and waited. Just as my lungs were burning, someone yanked Mom off me with tremendous force. Granny's voice was hoarse and shaking. Have you lost your mind? Are you really going to throw your life away again because of him? It's not worth it. Once was enough. Mom collapsed into her arms and let out a broken sob. Mom, I can't take it anymore. What if he turns out just as bad as his father? Annie held her tightly, but her eyes shifted toward me. For a moment, I thought she saw that my eyes were half open, but she only whispered calmly, "Let's go back to bed." Mom's crying faded into the distance. I lay there gasping for air, then pulled the blanket over my face and rolled onto my side. I had no idea how long it was before dawn started to break. That was when Granny walked in carrying a large enamel cup. It was filled with steaming mushroom soup. Drinking mushroom soup first thing in the morning was strange, but she simply set the cup on my nightstand and said, her voice as steady as the deep lines on her face. I understood what she meant. I almost wanted to tell her. They were in such a hurry. If they had waited a few more days, I would have died without anyone noticing. Now if I died, they would have a lot more trouble to deal with. I said nothing and picked up the cup, the heat stinging my hands. I tilted my head back and swallowed every drop. The strange bitterness spread from my tongue all the way to my chest. When it was empty, I set it back on the nightstand, lay down again, pulled the blanket over myself, and waited for the end to come. Granny picked up the empty cup. She stood there for a few seconds, said nothing and walked out. The effects came quickly. Pain twisted through my stomach, followed by a cold that ate across my body, until my teeth were chattering. My vision blurred, and sounds grew distant. I heard Granny pacing back and forth. It seemed like she was making a phone call. Then came the blaring siren of an ambulance. Hurried voices. Harsh lights under the white glare of the hospital lamps. A tube was forced down my throat, so they could pump my stomach. Like I gagged until my chest felt like it was tearing open. Tears and mucus were smeared all over my face. A young doctor glanced at me, then at Granny's ashen face. His brows deeply furrowed. What happened? Is there something wrong with the... He lowered his voice, suspicion creeping in with the last bit of strength I had left. Clutched at his sleeve. My voice came out rough and barely audible. It was me. I took the medicine myself. He froze. His eyes shifted toward me with something complicated behind them. I let go, collapsed against the bed and stared up at the ceiling. Being hard to kill might be its own kind of curse. Even dying felt out of reach for me. Granny stood by the bed, her back hunched, her gray hair brushing against her cheeks. Before I closed my eyes, I thought I saw a tear slide down her face and drop onto the floor. After I was discharged, home felt like a frozen grave. The walls were still white. The furniture was still neat. But everyone in the house looked drained, as if someone had taken all the life out of them. I became more obedient than ever. I ate quietly, went to and from school quietly, and worked quietly. I turned myself into a silent shadow, trying not to take up any space. I even started disciplining Casper. Be good. Don't make Mom angry, I told him, wiping the crumbs from his mouth. With a rare calmness, he looked up at me confused, but there was a hint of reliance in his eyes. As for my baby sister, Janet Willis, Mom guarded her like I was a thief. I still found a way to sneak into town to go to the church that people claimed was miraculous. I only had a couple of dollars in my pocket, but I spent them all and bought a lucky charm. When Mom was spacing out in the kitchen during Janet's afternoon nap, I slipped in like a ghost and tucked the charm into the corner of Janet's blanket. I hoped she would grow up safe. Then I decided to leave. I was a coward. If I wasn't going to die, then disappearing would have to do. No goodbyes were needed. It was a sweltering summer afternoon. The sun beat down so hard it made me dizzy. I walked aimlessly along the dusty path by the reservoir. Then a sharp, panicked scream echoed Connor. I spun around and saw Casper lose his footing and plunge into that deep, murky water. The scream tore through the heavy summer humidity, vibrating in my bones. I saw Casper thrashing in the water, his small arms slapping uselessly against the surface. The reservoir was deceptive. Near the banks it looked calm, but I knew the undercurrents there were vicious. Casper! I screamed, my voice cracking from disuse. I didn't think. I didn't calculate the risk. I didn't remember that 10 minutes ago, I was planning to disappear from the face of the earth. I just ran. I sprinted down the embankment, sliding on the loose gravel, tearing the skin on my knees, and dove into the murky water. The cold hit me like a physical blow, shocking after the heat of the day. I kicked hard, my eyes stinging as I forced them open underwater. It was dark, a swirling abyss of green and brown. I surfaced, gasping, and saw Casper's head bob under again. He wasn't screaming anymore. I reached him. He was panic-stricken, a feral animal. He clawed at me, his nails digging into my neck, trying to climb on top of me to breathe. We both went under. The water filled my nose, burning. For a split second, the dark thought surfaced. If we both die here, Mom would be sad for him, but relieved for me. It would be a perfect tragedy. But I was hard to get rid of. I grabbed Casper by the back of his shirt, kicked with everything I had, and hauled us toward the muddy bank. My lungs were on fire. I dragged him up onto the grass, both of us coughing up river water. Casper was retching, his face pale, trembling violently. You're okay, I gasped, patting his back roughly. You're okay, stupid. Connor. I looked up. Mom was running down the path, her face twisted in a mask of sheer terror. She had Janet in one arm, clutching her tightly, and she nearly tripped over her own feet reaching us. She dropped to her knees, ignoring me completely, and pulled Casper into a suffocating embrace. Oh God, Casper. My baby. Are you hurt? Did you swallow water? Casper was sobbing now, burying his face in her chest. I slipped. Connor. Connor jumped in. Mom froze. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine over Casper's trembling shoulder. I was dripping wet, shivering, bleeding from my knees and neck. I waited for it. I waited for the thank you. I waited for the hug. But I saw the flash in her eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was fear. She pulled Casper back slightly, checking him over, then looked at me with that familiar, cold suspicion. Why were you down here? She asked, her voice trembling not with relief, but with accusation. Did you call him down here? The air left my lungs. She thought I pushed him, or that I lured him here to hurt him. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I looked at the brother I had just saved. I looked at the baby sister with the lucky charm in her crib back home. No. Iwis parat. We're going home, she snapped, standing up and pulling Casper up with her. She didn't offer me a hand. She didn't check my injuries. Don't just sit there, Connor. Come on. She turned her back on me, herding her real children away from the danger, away from the monster. That was the moment the last tether snapped. I didn't stand up. I sat in the mud, watching them walk away. They didn't look back. Casper was too busy crying, and Mom was too busy comforting him. I'm not coming, I said to the empty air. I waited until they were out of sight, past the bend in the road. Then I stood up. I didn't go home to pack. I didn't want the clothes they bought me. I didn't want the backpack I used for school. I turned the opposite direction, toward the train tracks that cut through the edge of town. I was wet, I was bleeding, and I was empty. But for the first time in my life, I was free. The first 3 years were a blur of hunger and iron. I hopped a freight train that evening, shivering in a cattle car as the sun set. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to go far enough that the stain of my father's blood wouldn't follow me. I ended up in a city 3 states away, a grimy industrial hub where soot covered the snow in winter. I was 12, looking 14, acting 20. I learned quickly that Connor Willis didn't exist anymore. I went by Jack. Just Jack. I survived on scraps. I fought stray dogs for space under overpasses. I washed dishes in the back of a Chinese restaurant for cash under the table, until the owner caught me sleeping in the storage room and kicked me out. But I had one advantage. I was used to pain. I was used to being hated. The world's cruelty felt impersonal compared to Mom's, so it didn't sting as much. When I was 15, I met old man Russo. Russo ran a salvage yard on the edge of the city. He was a bitter, angry widower who hated the world almost as much as the world hated me. I tried to steal a catalytic converter from his lot to sell for food. He caught me. Instead of calling the police, he beat me with a cane, then threw a wrench at me. "You hold it like a sissy," he barked, watching me fumble to defend myself. "If you're gonna steal my parts, at least know how to take them off without stripping the bolts." He made me work off the debt. I moved into a rusted-out RV in the corner of the lot. Russo didn't ask about my family, and I didn't ask about his dead wife. We communicated in grunts and mechanical terms. I discovered I had a knack for machines. Engines made sense. If an engine was broken, there was a reason: a loose belt, a cracked piston, a clogged line. You could fix it. You could replace the bad parts and it would work again. People weren't like that. I worked for Russo for 4 years. I grew tall, broad-shouldered. The malnourished boy filled out with muscle built from lifting engine blocks and hauling scrap metal. I stopped looking at the ground when people spoke to me. I learned that if I stared them in the eye, they usually looked away first. I saved every cent I made. I got my GED under a fake address. And every year, on Mom's birthday, I went to a post office in a different town and mailed an envelope of cash to my old address. No return address. No note. Just money. It wasn't a gift. It was blood money. It was me paying rent for the womb I shouldn't have occupied. By the time I was 25, I wasn't just fixing cars. I owned the lot. Russo passed away from a stroke, leaving the business to me. To the brat who didn't quit, the will read. I sold the salvage yard and took the money to trade school, then university. I studied structural engineering. I wanted to build things that couldn't be knocked down. I started a construction firm, Ironclad Solutions. We specialized in retrofitting old buildings, making them safe, reinforcing the foundations. It was poetic in a sick way. I was the guy you called when the foundation was rotting but you wanted to save the house. I was successful. I wore tailored suits to hide the scars on my back and arms. I spoke eloquently. I had employees who respected me, women who were interested in me, but I let no one close. I lived in a minimalist apartment in Chicago, high above the streets. No clutter. No personal items. Just glass and steel. I still thought about them. Casper would be 22 now. Janet would be 18. I wondered if the lucky charm worked. I wondered if Mom was still alive. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I had excised them like a tumor. But then the letter came. It wasn't mailed to my home. It came to my business office, marked personal. The handwriting was messy, erratic. Dear Connor, I don't know if this will reach you. I hired a private investigator 3 years ago. It took him this long to find a Jack that matched your description. Mom is dying. She has cancer. It's bad. She doesn't have much time. She doesn't speak. She just stares at the door. Please. I know we don't deserve it. But come home. Casper. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. I poured myself a whiskey and stood by the window, watching the city lights. She told me to die, I thought. She told me she'd celebrate. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I was back in the kitchen, fishing the crumpled letter out of the trash. The town looked smaller. That's the cliché, isn't it? But it felt suffocatingly small. The streets where I used to scavenge for recyclables were now lined with gentrified coffee shops. I drove a rental car, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place in the driveway of the old house. The house hadn't changed. The paint was peeling slightly, the garden overgrown. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The front door opened. A young man stepped out. Casper. He looked like her. Soft features, light hair. But he looked tired. He walked down the driveway, approaching my car tentatively. I rolled down the window. Connor, he asked. I unlocked the door and stepped out. I towered over him now. When I left, we were children. Now, I was a stranger made of hardened steel. And he was a soft-edged man wearing a cardigan. Casper, I said. My voice was deep, rougher than he would remember. Tears welled in his eyes. He moved to hug me, then stopped, sensing the invisible wall I had erected around myself. He awkwardly dropped his hands. You came, he whispered. I wasn't sure. Is she alive? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. Yes. She's in the living room. We set up a hospital bed. And Granny? Casper flinched. Granny died 5 years ago. Dementia. It was rough. Toward the end, she kept asking for you. She kept asking if you drank the soup. A chill ran down my spine. I drank it, I said flatly. We walked to the door. I paused at the threshold. This was the place where I learned to be invisible. This was the place where I flipped tables and fought wars. Inside, the smell was different. It smelled of antiseptic and old lavender. A young woman was sitting by the window reading a book. She looked up. She had Mom's eyes, but there was a sharpness to them that Mom never had. "You must be the ghost," she said, closing her book. "Janet," Casper said warningly. She stood up. She was holding something in her hand. She walked over to me, her gaze dissecting my expensive suit, my stern face. She held out her hand. In her palm lay a small, tarnished metal charm. The cheap one from the church. "I found this in my blanket when I was little," she said. "Mom tried to throw it away, said it was trash. I screamed until she let me keep it. I never knew where it came from until Casper told me the story of the day you left." She placed the charm on the table. "Thanks for not hating me." "I never hated you," I said. "You were innocent." "So were you," she countered. She stepped aside, revealing the hospital bed in the center of the room. She was a skeleton. The woman who had wielded a broom like a weapon, whose scream could shatter my world, was gone. In her place was a frail heap of bones under a thin sheet. Her skin was gray, translucent. Her breathing was a wet, rattling rasp. I pulled a chair over. The metal legs scraped against the floor, the same tiles where I had lain bleeding, waiting for her to stop crying. "Mom," Casper said softly, leaning over her. "Mom, look who's here." Her eyelids fluttered. It took a long time for them to open. Her eyes were cloudy, unfocused. They wandered around the room before locking onto me. For a moment, there was no recognition. Then a spark. Her breath hitched. Her hand, hooked up to and for, twitched on the blanket. "David," she wheezed. I stiffened. David. That was his name. The rapist. My father. "No," I said, my voice cold. "Not him." She blinked, trying to focus. "Connor. I'm here." She stared at me. I waited for the hate. I waited for her to tell me to get out, to tell me I should have died in the reservoir, or the womb, or the night of the soup. Instead, a tear leaked from the corner of her eye, tracking through the deep wrinkles of her face. "You got big," she whispered. "I grew up," I said. "No thanks to you." Casper made a noise of protest behind me, but I held up a hand. I wasn't here to play nice. I was here for the truth. "Why did you call me?" I asked. "You wanted me dead." She closed her eyes. I saw him. Every time I looked at you. His eyes. His jaw. I couldn't breathe. "I am not him." "I know," she sobbed, a weak, pathetic sound. "I know, but I was weak. I was so scared." She tried to lift her hand. It hovered in the air, trembling. I looked at it. That hand had hit me. That hand had held the pillow over my face. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "Connor. My baby. I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. I had fantasized about this moment for years. In my head, I would scream at her. I would list every bruise, every meal denied, every hateful word. I would make her beg. But looking at her now, dying and pathetic, the rage drained out of me. It didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like exhaustion. "You broke me," I said, my voice steady. "You and Granny. You made me believe I was garbage. I spent my whole life trying to prove I had a right to exist." "I know," she whispered. "But I did it," I said, leaning closer. "I exist. I built a life. I have a name. And it has nothing to do with you." She nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I know. You were the strong one. Always." She pointed a shaking finger toward the nightstand. "The drawer." I looked at Casper. He stepped forward and opened the drawer. He pulled out a thick envelope and handed it to me. I opened it. Inside were the stacks of cash I had sent. Every single dollar. And a letter. "She never spent it," Casper said softly. "She kept it. She said it was blood money, but not yours. Hers. She said she was selling her soul by taking it." I looked at the money. "She wanted you to have it back," Casper said. "Plus the inheritance. She left the house to Janet and me. But the savings. It's all yours." I looked at Mom. She was fading again, the effort of speaking draining her last reserves. "I don't want the money," I said. "Take it," she rasped. "Please. Go be free." She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. I sat there for an hour. I didn't hold her hand. I couldn't bridge that final gap. But I didn't leave. I sat witness to the end of the woman who had started my life with violence and was ending it with a whimper. When she took her last breath, the room fell silent. Casper wept. Janet bowed her head. I stood up. I felt light. The funeral was small. I stood at the back, wearing sunglasses. People whispered. They knew the story, or the version Granny had told them years ago. The prodigal son. The bad seed. I didn't care. After the burial, we went back to the house. The atmosphere was strange. The oppressor was gone. The tension that had held the walls together was dissolved. Casper went to the kitchen. "I'm going to make dinner," he said, trying to be normal. "Pasta. Carbonara?" I asked. Casper froze. He looked at me terrified. He knew about the night with Granny. I'll make it, I said. I walked into the kitchen. I took out the bacon, the eggs, the cheese. My movements were precise, practiced. I cooked. I set 3 plates on the table. We sat down. Casper and Janet watched me. It's not poisoned, I said, taking a bite. It was good. Rich, creamy, salty. It tasted like survival. What will you do now? Janet asked. I go back to Chicago, I said. I have a company to run. Will you keep in touch? Casper asked, hope fragile in his voice. I looked at them. They were my blood. Half-blood, but blood. They hadn't held the pillow. They hadn't swung the broom. Casper had searched for me for 3 years. Janet had kept a cheap plastic charm for a lifetime. Yeah, I said. I think I will. Before I left town the next morning, I drove to the reservoir. The water was calm today. The sun was shining, reflecting off the surface like diamonds. I stood on the bank where I had dragged Casper out, where Mom had turned her back on me. I took the envelope of money, the reparations she had saved. I had thought about burning it. I had thought about donating it. But I realized that would be letting the past dictate the future. Money was just a tool. Like a wrench. Like a hammer. I took out my phone and called my assistant. Set up a scholarship fund, I said. For kids in the foster system. Kids who age out with nowhere to go. Trade schools, engineering, mechanics. What should we call it, sir? She asked. I looked at the water. I thought about the boy who wanted to die, and the boy who refused to. Call it the Hudson Fund, I said. Hudson? Is that a family name? No, I said, remembering the orphan Samuel Hudson who ate my popsicle and told me I was strong. Just an old friend. I hung up. I walked back to my car. I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't see the son of a rapist. I didn't see a mistake. I saw Connor Willis. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove toward the highway. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in my life, I was the one driving.